Today, we'll be going through a tutorial on how to create a React component. This series will be for beginners who are interested in learning React.js. We shall stick to a test-driven development for all the lessons in my series. This means that we'll write test cases for the component which we are developing. And obviously this test case will fail initially, but as we continue to work on our component and improve its functionality, you can see that the test cases are succeeding one by one. You need to create a React app using create React app. To do this, open the terminal in VS Code, then issue create React app space your project name. Remember that your project name should be in small letters, and you can use hyphens if required. This creation process would take some time depending on the speed of your machine and internet connection. Once the setup is done, you can open the project folder in VS Code and issue yarn start. This should bring up a development server in your machine, and it will be started in live mode. This means that you don't have to stop and start the server again after you make modifications to your files. It will be reflected live. It will also open up your default browser and bring up this default page. As the template mentions, you can go and modify the app.js file. The app.js file is located inside src folder or the source folder, and within that you can see app.js. So let's do some cleanup. We'll remove everything within the app div. After that, let's modify the style. Let's open app.css. We don't require anything other than the app class, so we'll remove everything and we'll retain .app. Oh, I need the background, so let's copy out the background attribute and we can place this in index.css. It will be a global style for our entire application, so we'll get a gray background, bluish gray background for our application. Okay, we'll place it inside here, body. Oh, I think we haven't saved app.js. Let's save it. Let's get back. Okay, now you can see a fine gray background for our application. Let's go ahead and create our components folder. We'll be placing all the components within components folder. Within components folder, we'll create a button folder. So first let's go ahead and create our button.js file. We'll be writing our component within button.js. So since this is a React component, we need to import React, and then we'll write our default class, export default class button extends react.component. So one of the required methods for a component is the render method. Basically, the render method should return the HTML to be rendered on the browser. So here I'll say button, and we need to have a label for the button, and this label should be configurable. So to put whatever user has placed within the custom button tag, we'll say this.props.children, and this.props is a special variable where you can access all the passed on attributes. So if user passes something along with our custom button, it will be available within this.props. We'll get to it, but for now you can do and learn. Also, we can make this method handy by using arrow functions if required. If you are using arrow function, just restructure the code as follows. And if you are using arrow function, then you don't have to explicitly mention return. You can directly return what this method should return. You can use render arrow button, and also instead of saying react.component, you can directly destructure component from React package, just like this. And then you can use extends component. Now let's go ahead and create the style for our button. It's button.css. We should import this button.css in our button component. Let's do that. To do that, just say import followed by the style name. And let's add some base class names for our button. I'll call it btn. This will be the base class for the button. So let's do some styling here. We'll apply some color. I would like to use white. Let's put some background color. I would like to have a blue color. Let's modify it using the color picker. I'll pick blue for now. Okay, this shade seems fine. I would like to have a rounded button, so I'll apply the border radius, but instead of using border radius property directly, just use some border radius generator from Google. You just need to search for border radius CSS generator in Google and it will bring up some results. So you can use one of the sites you get there. I need a 5 pixel border, and you can see that the generator has generated some CSS. You just need to copy paste it into the btn class. Let's align this a bit. Now that we have the component and style ready, let's check our button. So to do that, you need to import button into the app.js file. Now let's use our button in app.js and see if it works. So I'm placing it and saving it, and then let's open Chrome and see if it worked. Yeah, now you can see a test button, but the style looks awful. We need to modify it a bit. Let's get back to the class. Okay, let's create 3 classes for our button. Assume that our button can be styled based on a property we pass in, say size, and then based on the size we'll adjust the rendered button sizes. So let's keep it as small, medium and large. So I'll style my small button. I would like to apply a default padding also, say 5 pixel. As you see, as we applied the padding, the button looks slightly better. Now let's create the styles for small, medium and large button. I'll apply height, font size and width for all our 3 different buttons. For small button, let the height be 30 pixel, font size is small, width is 120, and for the medium button, let's keep the height as 40 pixel, font size as medium, and width as say 150. And for the large button, let's keep the height as 50 pixel, font size as large, and I'll copy paste it here. Yeah, 50 large, and width as say 175 or 200. Yeah, 200. Okay, now let's go back and write our specification. We now have a basic button. Now we will write our test case for the button. For that, we need to create a file name button.spec.js. You can name it as .test.js as well. Since we are going to perform test on a React component, we need some additional dependencies. They are enzyme and enzyme adapter React 16. This 16 is the version number of React I am using, 16.x. So we need to install adapter React 16. So once this is done, we need to configure our adapter and enzyme in setup_test.js. Let's do that. Here we need to import the adapter and enzyme. Enzyme is an enzyme package, and adapter is from enzyme adapter React 16. And let's configure enzyme to use the given adapter. For that, you need to write enzyme.configure and as a JSON adapter new adapter. So we are done with the setup for test. Let's get back to our specification file and write the specification for our component. Okay, let's mark our specification roughly here. Button should render a button element. Okay, let's say this is the button specification. Oh, we need to change the numbering. Okay, 2. Button should render based on the size attribute or size property. Say we can say small, medium, or large. Then button should call the click handler provided when user clicks on it. So I'll say the specification is button should call the handler when user clicks on the button. Okay, now let's start writing our test suite. Since we are testing a React element, we should have React in scope, and then we need to import shallow from enzyme. And we write our test case, and we'll describe our suite as button component tests, and then you give the arrow function, and within this suite we'll write our different test cases using IT. You can also say test instead of IT. I'll stick with IT for now. And our first specification is button should render a button element. Since we have already created the base component and it already uses the button element, this test should work without any modification to our original component. Let's write it. So to do that, I'll create a wrapper, and we'll try to mount our button here. Instead of mount, I'll say shallow. There are some difference between mount and shallow. We'll go through it later in some other video. And I'll label the button as test. Now our expectation is wrapper should contain a button element. So wrapper.find, and the element we are searching for is button. Length should be 1. Now that we have our first test case ready, let's try running it. To run it, we'll say yarn test followed by this file name, that is button.spec.js. This will start our test suite in watch mode. This means if you add additional test cases to the file, it will automatically get executed once you save it. So let's create the remaining specifications. So I'll say ID button should render the button based on the size property, say small, medium and large. And I'll use the wrapper equals shallow button, and I'll provide the property size as small. And the expectation is that if you search for an element with class .btn-small, then it should be 1. Likewise, we'll change the property to medium and large, and medium and large, and check whether they are also rendered properly. We should add code to make this test case run successfully, but let's create our test cases and make them fail first. So our third requirement is button should call the handler function when user clicks the button. So let's create a mock handler. For that, I'll say const click handler is equal to just.function or fn. Basically just.fn will create a stub function which we can pass around. So button on click, I'll give the click handler, and let's simulate a click event. To do that, I'll say wrapper.find button and then dot simulate click. This will simulate a click event. So our expectation is that click handler should have been called. Okay, now you can see that the test suite is re-executing and there is, yeah, as expected, you can see that one passed and two failed. So we now have to go back to our button component, and we need to include the functionality so that the remaining test cases will work. So to make it work, let's alter our render method. Right now the render method is directly returning a button, but let's change it back. We need to include some other statements to make our additional functionality working. So I'll say return this button, but before that we'll collect the properties which we passed on. So I'll say let size, and I'm applying small as the default size, and this is equal to this dot props. This means that we'll destructure the size uh, parameter from this dot props. As I mentioned earlier, this dot props will have all the passed down attributes of the button. So here what I did is I tried to extract the size attribute from this dot props, and if it is not provided, it will be assigned with the default value of small. And now we need to have some logic to switch class based on the uh, size attribute. So I'll say button plus size. So basically we'll switch the size based on the provided attribute. Now you should see that at least two of the test cases are succeeding. Yeah, you can see that here. Now only one test case is failing, and that is button should call the handler function when user clicks on the button. To make this work, we just have to include the on click handler. So I'll say on click. We can call the on click handler here. So the property which we are using is on click. So we'll say on click and on click. Then, yeah, on click and on click call means if we'll check whether on click is defined. If user didn't pass the on click function, then on click and on click will do nothing. Now you can see that all the three test cases have succeeded. Now let's get back to the browser and check how it works. So you can see that the styles for small button is applied. Let's get back to app. We'll try changing the size, or maybe we can showcase our three different button styles here. We can create a large button, medium button, and small button. So I'll name this as small, medium, and then we'll create one more for large button. Yeah, now let's get back. Yeah, you can see that the buttons are being rendered based on the size attribute, but I think we should have a margin. So I'll apply a default margin to the button component, say 2 pixel. Yeah, now it's spaced properly. Now we need to check whether our click handler is working. So I'll create a click handler here. Let's create one more button. And this particular button will have on click handler. So this is how on click is handled. So I'm providing a function directly. So this means that when user clicks, we should log clicked in our console. And I'll change the label of this button to click me. Let's see how this works. Now press F12 on your browser so that you will open up the console, and if you click, it should work. Oops, looks like we did something wrong. Let's get back and check what we did wrong. Okay, we are passing the function properly. This is fine. Let's get back to our button.js. So here onClick is imported, so that is fine, but here we are not providing it as a function. So we'll say onClick arrow and onClick. So now if you click on it, you can see that it is being logged. So that's it.